I love this. Top 10 reasons sugar isn't so sweet. So true.
Yeah,
Start us
so
off,
it's
everybody.
well, I mean, this is a timely topic because, well, we just came out of Halloween, and I know that some of you might have dug into the treat basket, or maybe dug into the grandkids or kids treat basket a little bit. So we're just here to talk about what can happen with the overconsumption of sugar, and it is one of those chemicals that we do talk about because it does have a serious impact on the body. 200 years ago, the average American consumed only 2 pounds of sugar per year. When the 70s came around, we ate 123 pounds of sugar per year. And now the average American consumes 152 pounds of sugar in 1 year. That's equivalent to 50 teaspoons or 800 calories a day in sugar.
That's
So a
crazy.
pretty crazy jump.
That is crazy. And I think it's gone up, and it's gone up a lot with kids. We're going to talk about the impact, on kids, and really the impact on everybody. But kids are just that much more sensitive, and can be affected by sugar a lot more. So I'll tell you what the secret is, if you've got some young kids for Halloween, because you have to be creative on how to get rid of the treats. So we'll dig into that a little later. Just remind me of that.
Absolutely. And so soft drinks, right? So like your pops and your blended coffees, like a large frappuccino, with whipped cream on top from Starbucks, are responsible for most of the added sugar in people's diets. And just one 12-ounce can of soda contains the equivalent of 10 or 11 teaspoons of sugar. And so that is just absurd. It's crazy the amount of sugar, and sometimes you can even feel it in your teeth, and we'll talk about that point in a bit, the effects that the sugar can have on your mouth and the health of your tooth. Yeah, and so other sources as well, we all know where the big time sources are from, but they oftentimes will say that cereals, even if they are healthy, a lot of cereals tend to have high amounts of sugar in them, so you have to be careful when looking at your labels.
Yeah, they're not always. They're not always. Sugar is not always where you think it's going to be. I remember having a conversation with a patient, and I said, so how's your sugar intake? Oh, I don't. I don't do sugar. So I said, well, what is your breakfast like? Well, I have. I have a bagel. I have, cream cheese, and she kept going on and stuff that obviously had sugar and yogurt and all that stuff. And I said, well, what do you think sugar is? And she's like, well, the white stuff that you put on there. So because she wasn't pouring sugar on anything, she thought she wasn't having sugar, but obviously it can be found in other places where you might not suspect it, right?
Absolutely. And so paying attention to your labels, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, and how some companies can actually say that they have lower amounts of sugar, whereas you look down the label and you actually see, oh, that's a type of sugar, this is a sugar. And so it actually adds up by the time that you get to the bottom of the label. And we'll talk about that a little more later in the show. But yeah, we'll be jumping into it now. Top 10 reasons why sugar just isn't so sweet. And so eating excess sugar causes tooth decay. And so I kind of alluded to this just in the previous slide here about how sometimes when you drink your energy drinks, or whoever drinks those pops, your teeth can feel kind of gritty. And so when certain bacteria in your mouth digest sugar, it produces an acid. And so that acid can actually decay teeth and cause tooth and root rot. And so that's why they say that you should definitely reduce your sugar consumption if you're trying to pay attention to your dental health.
Yeah. So, definitely the tooth decay. Do you remember back in school what bacteria causes tooth decay?
Is it lactobacilli?
It is not lactobacilli. It is Streptococcus mutans.
Wow. Wow.
Yes, I don't know
Love
why I
that one.
remember that. This is one of those board questions that I might have remembered for no odd reason. So
I
yeah,
think, well, you know what? The odd reason is for this particular reason alone. And it's really important to keep your mouth health, your oral health to the standard that it should be, because you only get 2 sets of teeth, right? And then after that, you have to start replacing them, and that doesn't become fun. So taking care of your teeth and understanding why reducing your sugar intake can have an impact on your oral health in a positive way. Super important.
And also flossing so important, right? Because a dentist told me there was a link between bacteria in your mouth and actually heart conditions, right? Heart, I believe, was like myocarditis, like inflammation in the heart. And so definitely oral health is important for more reasons other than, aesthetic reasons. Numero 2. Soft drinks promote calcium loss in urine. So how many of you want to have less calcium in your bones in the next few years? If you do, then go ahead and drink that Pepsi and Coca-Cola.
Yeah, and chances are, if you're drinking a lot of Pepsi and Coca-Cola, you might not be doing enough physical exercise or resistance exercise, and so you're not doing the weight-bearing exercises that will keep that calcium and keep your bones strong. I just thought that this would be a good point because, we oftentimes don't think about the association between, the soft drinks and high sugar drinks and the effects that it has on our bone quality. And so sugar will rob your bones of the calcium and the minerals that keep them nice and strong. And it's lost through the urine because you're just not able to absorb it. So it'll contribute to those brittle bones, causing diseases like osteoporosis and softening of bones as well.
Yeah, so it's crazy, 10 to 11 teaspoons in 1 can of Coke. Your daily, I don't know if you're going to mention that later on about how much sugar you should have in a day.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so 25 grams of sugar, right? So when you think about that, like 1 serving of watermelon has about 11 grams of sugar. So when you think about that, like if you're looking at how much sugar you're taking in a day, it's a battle keeping it under 25. Even when it's coming from natural sources like watermelon, that's abundant. Just 1 serving, you're at 11, right? So you've got, 13 or 14 grams left. You can't have your can of Coke at that point because you're going to be well over 25 grams, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I mean, there are good sugars and there are bad sugars, right? And so the good sugars would be the ones that come from fruits, and those are the ones that are mainly attached to a fiber. And so those are whole fruits, they would call them. And these are proper sugars, not the refined sugars. And we'll talk why those are poor and why they're worse than regular sugars later on. But yeah, drinking soft drinks,
Not good.
harm your bones.
Excess sugar consumption can lead to diabetes, right? If you're not sold yet on not eating sugar, we're going to continue until we get to 10.
Absolutely. And so this is one that we already know, right? There is that association between sugar consumption, insulin, and diabetes. So if you don't have those sugar levels, under control, it can lead to an abundant other health issues along the way.
Yeah.
And so eating excess amounts of sugar each time you eat it makes your pancreas work hard. So your pancreas works to release insulin, and insulin will lower that blood sugar in your blood so that you don't have these health-related problems and you can properly use sugar to what you need to use it for.
Yeah. And those of you who know somebody who has diabetes, or if you have diabetes yourself, you know far well that yes, sweets like squares and stuff at Christmas can affect it, but the bagel you have in the morning that later on converts to glucose as it's being broken down has a delayed reaction on your sugar levels as well, right? So hence the reason why you need to be aware of where that sugar is and not just looking at it from the refined sugar standpoint where, it's the more obvious foods that it's in. So
absolutely. And so, this excess sugar in the bloodstream can lead to an array of health problems, heart disease, vision loss, kidney disease. And with this type 2 diabetes, right, which is later in life, you're not born with it like type 1, your body doesn't use insulin well, or it doesn't release it well enough So you can't keep that normal. And about 90 to 95% of people with diabetes have type 2. And so this is a preventable type of diabetes that can be controlled by measuring and figuring out your sugar consumptions.
Yeah.
And so if there is something that you can control, a controllable disease, it's this type 2 version. And I understand that it's multifactorial, and sugar does have an addictive quality to it. However, this would be one way to help tackle this type of disease.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're seeing more and more, unfortunately, type 2 diabetes in young kids, right? Like it's more and more prevalent, and you're seeing a lot more obesity in young kids. I think in Canada, 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 kids is considered borderline obese or obese. It's a little bit worse in the US, but we're not too far behind. So, I always say parents need to be the example. There's a guy that used to talk, was pretty abrasive, but I think it's true as a statement. As a parent, if you eat something that's not good for you, and eventually, it has a bad effect on your health, you could call it suicide. And says if you feed it to your kids, then it should be considered murder, right? It's a little extreme, but in a way, you can, kids in the beginning don't have that craving for sugar, but they gain that craving for sugar because they're obviously exposed to it, and we kind of foster that environment, so to speak, if we're not careful. So kids are pretty sensitive to that, and they're pretty sensitive to your habits, and they'll mimic what you're doing as well as a parent. So definitely be aware of that. Number 4, in the middle cut, sugar can be poisonous when combined with other compounds.
Yeah, and so we spoke about earlier how, the only good source of sugar are those that are still attached to fiber, mainly whole fruits. And Dr. Roach was talking about how you eat a watermelon and that's, a lot of sugar, but that is good sugar. And so sugar can be poisonous when combined with other compounds because it's bleached with chlorine and filtered with animal bones when white sugar is refined. And so when you're creating that white sugar, it's bleached to create that nice white color. And then it's filtered with animal bones. And essentially, when it's exposed to a certain organic compound, it converts to another compound called dioxin. And so dioxin is that lethal compound in the blood. And so refined sugar, the most lethal neurotoxin that people consume on a regular basis.
Mm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and actually just another point as well that, we consume this much sugar on a regular basis, and it has, a number of carbohydrates in it, but alcohol as well has even more carbohydrates in it than sugar, just as a preamble for poisonous compounds.
Yeah. And when you know all of this, you're like, okay, well, I won't get the regular Coke or Pepsi. I'm gonna get diet one, right? And we all know, what's in Diet Pepsi or Diet Cola or whatever it is, and that is also just as bad in terms of a neurotoxin on the brain. So the more you know of sugar, the more it has to kind of sink into your mind that okay, yes, you're going to consume it, and you're going to consume it hopefully in good forms, like in the form where it's attached to a fiber when you're eating good fruits, but definitely try to keep it within that range of 25. You're not going to bat 1,000 every time. Yes, you're going to go to parties and stuff, and it's going to happen, but always try to get back on the train, and maintain your sugar levels to a certain level that's acceptable.
Yeah, so sugar slows weight loss. Sugar hinders weight loss because of the high insulin levels. It causes the body to store the excess carbohydrates as fat. And so when sugar is broken down, it's broken down into carbohydrates. And then you store those in your body when there's a certain number of it and you can't use it, right? If you're not working out or you're not exercising, you will store this as fat.
Yeah. And not only that, like on the point before, the slide before, you're saying, sugar is, dead calories. Like you're not going to feel, full after eating sugar, let's say, but those are all calories that get added up at the end of the day. which eventually, you're stepping on the scale and you're up or you haven't moved at all because you're just eating these empty calories that don't mean anything, but definitely have an impact in the end in terms of math and how many calories you took in. Chronic fatigue. Absolutely. One thing that I've noticed, and I don't do this too much because I fast in the morning, but the reason I started fasting in the morning was because if I ever had like a bagel or something in the morning, by 10, 11, I was just like zonked out. It was just that dip where I needed more sugar, right? And then I'd get something that wasn't necessarily healthy and I'd boost myself back up and then only to feel another crash at 2 and up and down all day long. So
Yeah. And like you're saying, like all day long, up and down, up and down, and up and down, it creates that vicious cycle, right? And so this
yeah,
addictive quality of sugar, that it gives you this rush, right? And then you get this fall, and then you're like, well, the only way that I can recover or combat this fatigue is by fueling my body with sugar again, right? And so you're not naturally creating the time of day where the hormones should be released.
yeah.
You're just sort of supplementing with that sugar throughout the day to get your energy. Whereas you could be getting it better from other sources more naturally if you just sort of worked at it.
Yeah. I actually had a case, the lady was drinking like 2 to 3 liters of pop a day, right? And then wondering why she had no energy. And, she had 2 young kids and wasn't there for the kids in the way that, she needed to be. So, sugar can definitely rob yourself of your full potential, really, when it comes to your energy. And, of course, you're tired, so you don't want to go to the gym. You're too tired to go to the gym. So you're increasing your intake of something that's not good for you, and you're deleting activity that's actually good for you. So the combination of both ends up being a disaster. Sugar increases mood swings, irritability, and anxiety.
Right, absolutely. And so just building on the blocks that we were just talking about, and how sugar can contribute to chronic fatigue, it's an addictive substance, right? And so you use it to give you a boost, to give you energy. And then when that boost is gone, you'll start to go through fatigue. You'll have a change in your mood because you're not as enlightened, you're not as happy. You'll get irritable, less patience because of the fatigue setting in. And apparently it makes you anxious when you're lacking the sugar that you need, right? It can make you very either hyper energized, taking you really high, and then you'll go through periods of a lot of lows. And so that happens to those who might have a sugar addiction.
That's a picture of Ben here on Monday morning when Bell went ahead with daylight savings time. And it was wrong and showed up at clinic a little earlier than he should. Yeah, so if you're irritable and you're anxious, maybe look at your sugar level. Compromises the immune system. I like this one. So pertinent nowadays with everything we have going on. Diet is a huge key to your immune system.
Sugar compromises the immune system. It lowers the efficiency of white blood cells for at least 5 hours after eating. What do you think of that?
Crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so the point that's here as well is that sugar can feed cancer cells. So it can produce these cells that aren't working properly by making the blood more acidic. And cancer cells seem to thrive in acidic environments.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, when it comes to the body's alkalinity or acidity, as you just said, cancer thrives in an acidic environment. So one of the things that I always tell people is to make sure you up the ante on the greens, right? So it's great to do this as a general practice in the winter when it comes to the time where people are getting the flus and the colds and all that stuff, to boost up your diet along with other things that obviously you can do. We won't get into tonight because of time constraints, but there's one product that I like, which is called Greens Plus. And it's a very, very good product in terms of the quality, no GMOs. I believe it's vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free, and basically it's a powder. It's green powder. You put it in water and you drink it. And basically, because you're getting lots of greens, you're aiding in your body's pH level and making it more basic and not, acidic, so more alkaline. And that is always good. right? So we want to make sure that we make that happen. And sugar is one of those things that actually increases the acidity, which is going in the opposite direction of what we want.
Absolutely. It'll also increase free radicals, right?
Yes.
So the breakdown of those prions producing free radicals, which are harmful to the immune system, as well as producing oxidative stress. And so it'll increase the inflammation in your body. And it'll
And guys, if you don't
increase.
know what free
Yeah.
radicals are, so me to cut in there, Ben,
Yeah.
free radicals are unpaired cells, right? And when they're unpaired, they get really, really anxious and they want to pair. And what happens, they bind to another cell, and then they bind to another one, they bind to another one. And all of a sudden, you've got a growing cell that's out of control that becomes cancer. So free radicals need to be oxidized by a redox reaction, so to speak, and sugar creates more free radicals. So definitely something that you don't want. So not only does it increase your acidity, which promotes cancer, it increases free radicals as well. So it's a double combination of a disaster waiting to happen. And plus, at the same time, it's lowering your white blood cells.
Yeah.
You want to drink this stuff, right?
Yep. It lowers the efficiency of the white blood cells for at least 5 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, sugar compromises the immune system.
Very, very good. Good information. Guys, you're listening to Hump Day Conversation number 47 with Dr. Ben Boudreau and Dr. Clayton Roach. We are live right now. If you're catching us tomorrow morning, we are probably on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, make sure you click on the subscribe button on the top right and browse our past conversations. We've done 47 of them. So surely we will be speaking to you in one of these episodes. You can find yourself, whether you've had tennis elbow or golfer's elbow or wrist problem or headaches, surely you can find one of those episodes that applies to you. So thank you so much for the ones that have been with us all this time. Really appreciate you. And if you enjoy these episodes, give us a little thumbs up, give a comment or anything that we know that you are there. Number 9, numéro 9, eating sugar decreases helpful cholesterol and increases harmful cholesterol. Well, that ain't good.
Yeah. So increasing or eating sugar decreases your high density lipoproteins, your good cholesterol. These are the types of cholesterols that will flow properly through your blood. Super easy, but it increases the harmful ones. So the low density lipoproteins, these are the ones that are sticky. They'll stick to the sides of the walls in your arteries, and they'll cause that artery to stenose or get smaller. So sugars will lead to those types of cholesterols.
Yeah, never good. We talked about this in another Hump Day conversation with Dr. Brian Raid, right?
Absolutely.
And the cellular energy and all that stuff with cholesterol and the things that you can do. So here's a very simple thing that you can do for cholesterol. Just watch your sugar levels, right? So sometimes we think we need to get elaborate and very complicated and complex in terms of where do we need to go to get healthy. Well, just look at the simple things you're doing and do one thing and do it well and commit to it and introduce it into your routine. Like getting rid of your sugars, right? That's one thing that we can all do or decrease because we're going to eat it and that's fine. There's good sugars and bad sugars, but that's definitely something you can do to promote health. Oh,
Yeah.
boy. Kids. Yeah.
Yeah. So sugar can contribute to hyperactivity. So, we oftentimes will say, and even when I was a kid, don't eat sugar before bed. No, you can't eat that. Don't eat this. Don't eat that, because you will go through that heightened period of hyperactivity where you can feel very anxious and your body will go into a slight bit of fight or flight. You may start sweating. Your heart rate will increase. You might be able to focus a little better, but yeah, soon enough, you'll go through that lull period and that's when you crash. But yes,
So when you think about it, when you're taking a medication, right? Typically, if there's a medication that's for adults, and then you can also take it for kids, who usually needs less of the dose in order to have the same effect? Is it kids or is it adults? Right? Obviously, it's kids. So sugar is no different, where kids will react way more to the same dose of sugar than adults. So we need to be super diligent with kids. So one of the things that, and one of the questions that we had was, how do you make that routine where you replace, refined sugar for fruits and more and better sugars. So I think one of the things that you need to do is you need to have it available, right? With our kids, it's just no question. Breakfast, there's going to be a fruit and it's there, vegetables, whatever they are, same routine. If it's not there, right, you are going to go into the pantry and choose something that's in a box, right, like cereal or whatever. But if you have fruits already cut up and done up, and you do it up the night before, and you have it in your fridge, and you open it up the next morning, and there's fresh grapes or whatever you like, then you're that much more likely, because if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And when it's out of sight, the mind will say, I need sugar. You're not going to go to the fridge and cut up an apple or do that stuff. You're going to go for what's easy. So I think it's important to have it available. That's the number one thing, and especially with kids too, because kids will eat fruits, but they will choose candies and chocolate bars over fruits if the fruit is not there and they see a chocolate bar. And I think it's just a matter of routine.
And what was your tip that you were going to give to parents, Dr. Roach, that might help them decrease or monitor their kids' sugar intakes?
So one of the things that we do is called the witch switch. So some of you might be aware of this, and it's not like we came up with it, but we have been doing it for the last 3 years or 4. I'm not sure, 3 years, I think. And basically, what happens is in the middle of the night, the witch comes by the Roach household and drops some toys in exchange for the agreed upon treats that we were willing to give to the witch. So basically, the witch comes in, she grabs the bag of treats that we will have negotiated with the kids, that we were willing to part ways with, and she leaves a toy. And the kids wake up the next morning and see the gifts that the witch came bearing with. And it happened yesterday morning. She came yesterday. And this morning, the kids were very happy. So, those are some of the things that you can get away with when kids are young. And later on, you need to maybe find other ways to entertain taking away sugar. But definitely it's worked well for us. And, we're pretty good all year round. And I'm a firm believer, you can let kids do their thing for a while. And I don't think it's what you're going to eat in 2 or 3 days that's going to destroy you. It's what you eat in the other 361 days of the year. But nonetheless, you don't want to have those hanging around for month upon months and kids constantly digging into that bag. It's just not a great thing to do, and just not a great routine to set, habit to set.
Great point for all the parents out there, maybe something that you can use with your young kids. And so we were talking about this earlier, to be careful when you're reading the labels, because sugar is commonly disguised. So they're oftentimes will list it as cane sugar or high fructose corn syrup. It's really easy to read that sugar is in those, but sugar goes by many, many different names. And so because food manufacturers, they have to list all the ingredients in descending orders from by quantity. This allows them to list, different names for sugar along the way. And so here's some of the names that sugar can go by in case you're reading your labels and you're not sure. Barley malt, beet sugar, buttered syrup, cane juice, caramel, castor, dehydrated cane juice, dextrose, fruit juice concentrate, glucose, golden sugar, lactose, malt syrup, molasses, just to name a few. And so they can easily hide it in there and sneak it in there when you think that you're getting something low in sugar, when you just might not be getting that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a great thing, because a lot of people don't know what to look for, right? So definitely it can be hidden, and they've become great at hiding some of the stuff, because they're just not going to put sugar on there, and they're going to hide it and whatever they can. And a lot of companies, what they're doing is, instead of doing sugar, they'll go to one of these variations of sugar or sweeteners, knowing that people are not probably going to recognize it as being that. So Vitamin D, again, this is probably our third or fourth Humday conversation promoting vitamin D. We've actually had people come in and buy it. This is a phenomenal product from Orthomolecular. It's a liquid, so you don't have to be taking a pill. I tend to overload on vitamin D in the winter, being that our climate is such that we don't have great sun in the winter. So you definitely can load up on your vitamin D in the winter. Great for immune system as well. And this one here comes with K2, which allows for the proper absorption of that vitamin D. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this was useful. Very, very good conversation tonight. Thank you, Ben, for digging up that research. And how about this? Health is a multifactorial thing, right? And as much as we chiropractors think that we're the best thing since sliced bread, and a nervous system is the key to good health, we do sometimes tend to come back to reality and know that there's other things that people need to do for their health other than just chiropractic care, right? And I say that jokingly, but definitely, nutrition is huge. And what we touched on tonight is something that's very, very, it's almost like the pandemic of nutrition is sugar, right? It's high. Like I said, more and more kids are showing to be obese. Sugar is at an all-time high. The intake of sugar is at an all-time high. And the impact, as you saw tonight, and we probably could have made a list of 20, 25 reasons not to eat sugar. So we stuck to 10, by virtue of time. But man, like after reading this, like who would want us to go ahead and guzzle like a can of Coke, right?
I just think how amazing it is that the consumption of sugar has gone up that much in like 50 years. So the 70s going from 123 pounds of sugar per year to 152 pounds of sugar per year is absolutely astonishing. And so it just goes to show how much they're using it in the diet now, and as an addictive substance as well. It's no wonder that people can't go very long without having the sugar that they need to keep their energy levels high.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to, and people are asking me, what are some foods that we can seek out to get good sugars in? And the truth is that they're hard to find because there are so many, deterrents and distractors in the way. Oh, this is good for you, or this is good for you. Go down the sugar aisle, and I guarantee you that some of those healthy cereals that you were looking at down the cereal aisle just might not be what you're looking for.
And one thing to be careful about is a lot of the gluten-free products, right? In order to mask, the fact that there is no gluten, a lot of these gluten-free products are high in sugar. So be careful about gluten-free products. I'm all about, being gluten-free, and if that's your thing, great. But buying gluten-free products per se, you got to be careful in terms of what you're picking off the shelf. One more thing, I forgot that actually my daughter at one point, I don't know where she'd gone to a party. Anyway, there's like all these like sugar treats that they had given. So anyway, they went upstairs and they ate like, I don't know how many little bags of Skittles. Anyway, later on we found out because the empty packages were in the garbage can in the room, and the door was closed, and we're like, oh my God. It's like, when your dog gets into chocolate and you're like, holy geez, we gotta be careful. Well, the kids got into Skittles. And so as a punishment, we dug in how much sugar was in Skittles. So we poured sugar in a glass to the same amount that they'd eaten the Skittles, right? And it was like a huge amount, right? So we had to to create a visual, which my wife is great because she's a teacher and she did all this, and I thought that was genius. They said, we're only allowed to have this much. Here's what you had. So now we're going to disperse what you have today over the next few days. And we basically starved them with sugar to the extent where that glass was now empty because we had to space it out over the next few days because they decided to eat it all in one day. So I think sometimes with kids, they need that visual to see. And of course, then I come in and explain, along with my wife, in terms of why sugar wasn't good and what it could cause. And so, sometimes we think they're too young to understand, but when you have a little bit of fun with it, they can understand, what they just did without, too much punishment, but just eliminating some of the sugar for the next few weeks.
Absolutely. And so again, like this is a timely, again, yeah, Hump Day Conversations. That's Dr. Clayton Roach. I'm Dr. Ben Boudreau from Roach Chiropractic Center in Bedford. Yeah, I mean, it's about trying to balance things out. Again, people are commenting, they say, the holidays are my downfall. I know around the holidays that I'm going to consume, X amount of sugar, or I won't exercise X amount of times, et cetera, et cetera. We understand that you're going to go through pitfalls, and we understand everybody consumes sugars. There's not a single person here that doesn't consume bad sugars. It happens. We're talking about the effects of the overconsumption and its impacts on the individual, the organism, and society as a whole, talking
Yeah.
about obesity, especially in kids. So we're just trying to create healthier cultures so that you understand the effects that it could be having on your body, not just in the short term, but also in the long term.
And guys, when you're going, like, this is a little tip that I got a while back. When you're going to a party, Christmas party, you know how they have like, plates, and they might have sweets on a table and they have a plate. Grab the smallest plate, and that way you can fit less and just say, I'm just going to have, one little plate, and that's fine. Don't grab the biggest plate on the table, and limit yourself to one trip, right? One thing you do is you could bring something to that, whatever, where the party is or the house. You bring something that is somewhat healthier than what's going to be there, and be a little selfish and eat your own stuff, right? And just go around and taste it a little bit. But there's always little things. Maybe every time you go more than 25 grams of sugar, you walk 2 kilometers, or kind of make it during that 2-week window of Christmas. You kind of make a pact with yourself that for every time you go over, you're going to reward yourself with a 2-kilometer walk or something. Just kind of do something to kind of balance things out a little bit. Even though you're not balanced during these 2 weeks, you try to balance yourself out throughout the year, and typically you're going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, this is Hump Day Conversations number 47, why sugar isn't so sweet. And so if you guys are just tuning in now or at the end of the conversation, you can always go check out this this episode live on Facebook tomorrow, or sorry, not live. You'll catch the recording tomorrow morning on Facebook, or you can go over to the YouTube page and check out the page as well, where we have all the rest of our posts and etc. from previous weeks, all 47 episodes.
So what we'd like for you to do now is just please share the episode, right? Just there's a gift in that, and then people might get woken up by listening to what we just said tonight, and just realizing that that's their moment where they're going to commit to health, or that's their moment they're going to stop eating sugar, or whatever it is. Any of these conversations, sometimes it's just for some people, it resonates with what we just said. They resonate with what we just said, and then say, okay, I'm going to take care of my low back pain, I'm going to take care of my headache. Enough is enough. When is enough enough? Everybody is different, but it might be this episode that you're going to share with them that kind of triggers them.
My favorite part of Hump Day Conversations is?
Oh.
My favorite part of doing our Hump Days live once a week is when we hear from patients in the clinic, or people send us a private message saying, thank you so much for doing that episode. That was really interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So that for me is like the greatest thing that I can hear, is that, we're coming into practice, and the people that we see, weekly, bi-weekly, etc., are watching these episodes and getting the advantage of having that and that extra bit of information. And so I just really, they understand the value, and I understand the value, and I just love it. So
Yeah,
thank you guys so much for supporting.
Thank you so much. And that's part of growth, is learning, right? And that's what we want to know, because if we're sharing information you already know, that's a little bit of a waste of time. So we really appreciate the feedback, and give us comments in terms of maybe what topics you want to learn about, and anything. Like, we're open to anything, as long as we're giving a little bit of time to do a little bit of research, so we can put out a quality product and good information that we feel that we do every week, because we give it time. So thank you, Ben, for doing this as well, and all the work that you put into this. And thanks for everybody that's observing us every week. Thank you. So next week we'll be live again on Wednesday. We'll try to be on time this time. And we had a little glitch there, wondering how the heck did we go live on Facebook, and the thing that we usually press wasn't there anymore, so we had to kind of figure it out. But we figured it out. and we were good.
Alex's post in the comment section. He writes, "Great talk tonight, guys. A sweet topic."
Oh, sweet.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to Hump Day Conversations, number 47 with Dr. Clayton Roach and Dr. Ben Boudreau from Roach Chiropractic Center in Bedford. Hope you guys all have a great week, and we will see you guys again next week, and some of you guys in clinic before the end of the week.
Take care, guys.